Hello, my name is Deborah Twining and I'm a counsellor at Griffith University. We are presenting a workshop today called Managing Stress and Exams, along with Julie Coles. So I'll be doing the first half of the workshop and Julie will be doing the second half. It's a 2-hour presentation on general stress management tips, and then we're going to follow up with some specific tips to managing anxiety around exams. We hope you enjoy the presentation, and we would like you to have pen and paper handy so that you are able to take notes during the PowerPoint presentation. It would be useful to take notes as well as refer and have the handouts handy. When you registered for the workshop, you should have got some links and been able to access those. This will all be very handy for you to develop an action plan at the end of this workshop, which we hope you are able to do by taking some notes alongside the workshop. And we invite you to also pause the presentation. You're able to at any time to pause the recording and have an opportunity for reflection and to take some notes down that you can take away with you. This is a pre-recorded workshop, so it's not live. And yeah, it's just a pre-recording of managing stress and exams. We know that university students are very stressed at this time, particularly with rapidly transitioning to the online environment, and also we're studying from home, and we all are at home working and studying in a very different environment. And then we have exams on top of that, as well as the COVID-19 context. So I'm going to share a PowerPoint presentation with you now. I'll be turning my camera off as I do that. Here we have the workshop, Managing Stress and Exams, by Deb Twining and Julie Coles. We want to acknowledge the impact of COVID-19 and the resources that we have to assist you. There's a Sleep Health Foundation fact sheet, the Online Health and Wellness Centre, useful resources there, and they're the two resources, Student Support and Counselling and Student Mental Health and Wellbeing. Just useful to show you those resources. The Beyond Blue fact sheet, looking after your mental health during the coronavirus outbreak, and the Sleep Health Foundation fact sheet that I brought up for you. There's some mindfulness and relaxation apps, which is Calm, Breathe, Smiling Mind, Headspace, and Insight Timer. These apps are very useful for small opportunities of practice to be alert, focused and present and give our busy mind a break. There are also some lovely YouTubes that Dr. Russell Harris does, and you might want to take note of that. That's Dr. Russell Harris if you Google him. Acceptance and Commitment Therapy and Mindfulness YouTubes. They're very short, often animated and full of interesting tips and ideas, and again, very brief. Some other COVID-19 tips around self-care, maintaining perspective, trying not to make assumptions and read the future, maintaining a healthy balance of media coverage as too much can make us anxious, maintaining physical activity, healthy diet and sleep pattern, maintaining routine, structure and purpose by attending to values and things that are important to us. Social isolation does not mean social distance does not mean isolation. So it's really important to stay connected with others. Practicing acts of kindness to ourselves or to others, and compassion. reflecting on gratitude each day, what we're grateful for, and some people keep a gratitude journal. Relaxation and fun and enjoyment opportunities, no matter how small, and developing a calm, practical approach. Definition of stress: physical, mental or emotional factor that causes bodily or mental tension. The causes can be internal or external. Stress is a reaction your body experiences as a result of a demanding circumstance or an event that requires immediate action and attention. And as we've mentioned, it does affect the body with your nervous system to produce hormones that result in sometimes quickened breathing, a faster heart rate, tightening of muscles, and even just a burst of energy. Often we don't like stress, we want to get rid of it, but that's very much like trying to get rid of breathing. Stress can make you more aware of your surroundings, it can increase your focus, give you much needed energy to complete a challenging task, and supply your body with the extraordinary ability to handle an emergency or a threat, often known as the fight-flight response. Your body's intended purpose for stress is therefore a naturally good one and a beneficial one. Going to play you a YouTube clip now.
Watch this. One little piece of paper can have a remarkable effect. Stress is stressful. But if you understand a bit about what it is, you'll be better able to deal with it. First though, take a few deep breaths. In fact, do that anytime you feel stressed. It helps. Stress is a survival mechanism. When danger appears, it can get you out of trouble quickly. Your body crashes up the gears and throws all its resources into getting you moving. Your heart pumps furiously to increase blood pressure, glucose is sent to the muscles as a fuel injection, and you become totally focused on what psychologists call fight or flight. Thing is, this emergency state is only meant to last just long enough to get you out of danger. But here in the 21st century, we stress about different things, and for much, much longer. Your brain and body stay on red alert, and you'll be less able to think clearly, learn, or remember things. Take a few more deep breaths, because as you now know, stress is a physical reaction, and deep breathing helps to counteract its effects. So, what else can you do? Okay, top tips to reduce stress. First, get plenty of exercise. Let out all that locked up energy. Now, back to the problem. Get in control. Scope out the situation and how you're going to tackle it. Don't stress alone. Talk to someone. Socialize. And have a laugh. You can't laugh and quake with fear at the same time. Get down with nature on a big or small scale. And if your mind won't stop worrying, give it something else to do instead.
So some takeaway points from that video. You might want to pause the video and take note of what you might have heard that might be useful to you. Breathing we'll go into a little bit later, and the importance of breathing and knowing how to breathe properly and deeply can calm our mind and our body. Stress management is having the ability to recognise situations that cause stress in order to put forward strategies to prevent or manage stress from occurring. Setting up your life in a way for the opportunity of stress is unlikely to occur. It can be about being really clear on why you're taking on this challenge. What are your long-term goals? knowing that stress and anxiety, a certain level of it can be normal when we're challenged. And though it's not possible to get rid of, we are able to manage it, and there's many evidence-based ways of managing stress. So we aim to notice stress rather than react, to be alert versus alarmed, to be solution-focused versus problem-orientated. The way we manage stress is very different from individual to individual, including how each individual responds to various coping techniques. We hope we might introduce you to a few new ones today that you'd be open and willing and curious to try, to bring in something different. We hope this doesn't look too familiar, but it may look a bit familiar. And this is more the experience of severe anxiety, where we have a number of bodily responses going on and feeling panicked and overwhelmed. We hope that you're able to stay in your circle of what is in your direct control and what you can influence. You might again want to pause this video to just note some of these bodily symptoms. They are more severe and more panic orientated and overwhelmed. When we're anxious, our breathing changes and we can go into a fight-flight response, which activates the sympathetic nervous system as though we're under threat. We increase our intake of carbon monoxide without physical exertion, and it can be quite difficult to return back to optimal carbon monoxide. Hence, we may get some of these symptoms, and we'll talk more about that later. This is the cognitive behavioural therapy model, often known as CBT. So we have in the blue box the situation, which is often called a trigger, which might be exams. And then we have the thoughts, which is often what we call self-talk, how we're talking to ourselves about this trigger. Are we being a coach and supportive to ourselves, or are we being a critic? Are we being perfectionistic? Are we looking at social comparison, comparing ourselves to others? Are we ruminating and dwelling on negative thoughts? Then we have physical reactions, which we've talked about with the body, which might be tired, fatigued, stomach aches, headaches, and emotions, feeling anxious and stressed. And then our behaviour may be avoiding and procrastinating. Sometimes the thoughts play a very powerful role and can be quite repetitive, as I've mentioned, and almost on autopilot. We need to be really aware of these thoughts and notice them versus being caught up in this cycle. So again, just to pause the video if you like, or take some notes. So when I say the word exams, what thoughts may come to mind for you? They could be distorted thoughts, they could be out of proportion, excessive worry, what if, and think the worst. What feelings come to mind? This could be irritated, tense, frustrated. What is the body experiencing physically? Tension, stomach aches, increased breathing or heart rate, perhaps sleep and appetite is affected. And the behaviours that come to mind when we say the word exams. This is what can create the CBT or cognitive behavioural therapy cycle. Often is about our perception of a situation and our perceived ability to cope. So it might be past or it might be future fears. As I said, the mind's very busy thinking what if and thinking the worst, and we do tend to have a negative bias in our thoughts as well. So again, pause the video and perhaps take some notes, because this contributes to your own individual cycle of your experience of exam anxiety. With healthy anxiety, as mentioned, most of us will feel a level of anxiety before and during an exam. Anxiety can heighten our senses and keep us mentally and physically alert, which is important for focus and concentration. So we do need a certain level of stress to be able to perform well. This graph shows that, it's been around for a long time, the relationship between stress and performance. And you'll see in the middle the area of optimum performance, where a certain level of stress, cortisol and different other hormones to enable us to focus and concentrate and perform well. On the lower left side of the graph, we have lower than optimum stress level, which is boredom, not enough stimulation or demand, and we become quite disengaged. We could procrastinate here. On the right-hand side, we have higher than optimum stress, which leads to high levels of anxiety and overwhelm. This again varies from individual to individual, so you might want to pause the video again to just have a bit of a check-in with yourself as how do you know whether you're in the area of optimum performance versus either side of that, lower than optimum stress levels or higher than that. Exam anxiety. If anxiety results from being underprepared and falling behind, do we think this is a normal and rational reaction? I think so. If we're underprepared and we haven't organised ourselves well, there's that saying, prior planning prevents poor performance. We're likely to be quite anxious. Cramming actually increases anxiety, where the focus is, look how much I don't know. If you're in this situation, you need to really focus on what it is that you can do versus what you can't. What have you got direct control over, and what can you influence instead of focusing on what is outside of your control? Smart goal setting may help here, and we break down SMART goal setting, you may have heard of it, to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. Again, it might be good to take note of that in your notes. SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. Exam anxiety is a type of performance anxiety, extreme distress and anxiety in testing situations. So this is where we have the higher than optimum stress level, or we may even have a disengagement from what we are fearing. These are more than normal fears and worries about wanting to do well. This is where we are feeling quite incapacitated and paralysed. Research does say that about 40% of students experience exam anxiety, so you're not alone. Some research says it's even higher than that. This is a very subjective experience, and it is important, if we look at the third point of fear of evaluation or judgment, that could be our own judgment and evaluation of ourselves or of others, a worry that others will judge us if we don't do well. It's a common problem, as I've mentioned, but it can interfere with performance. It's really important to avoid social comparison and set your own goals rather than comparing yourself to others. Exams don't equal your self-worth. Subjectively, some of us are great at assignments and don't perform well in exams. Others perform really well in exams and not assignments. Others are really good at public speaking and others are not. Try to be kind to yourself and compassionate. developing a coaching way of talking to yourself. The excessive anxiety, as we've mentioned before, again, we have the cognitive behavioural therapy model coming up. Physical distress, like butterflies in the stomach and headaches. Emotional upset, fear, anger, helplessness and depression. Cognitive or thought difficulties, decreased concentration, mind blanks or mind racing, and behavioural changes. It's like sleep, appetite, and mood disturbance. Again, a point for reflection and perhaps pausing your video to look back to when you were last stressed and what helped, and also look at what didn't help to not repeat those patterns again. So again, just an opportunity to pause, and you might like to pause on past exam experiences as well and look at how that may have impacted on you physically, emotionally, mentally. Might be useful to think about what you might tell a friend. When you talk to a friend, if they're really stressed around exams, we can often be very compassionate around them and give them some really supportive ideas and perspective. Some other ideas are, as I mentioned, the SMART goal setting, knowing what our needs are and reaching out to our support system, outcome focused, a sense of relief once exams are over, and achievement, productivity, and rewarding yourself. You can also visualise. It's a very powerful tool, visualising for success, and that will be discussed later in the group. Have you ever heard of the word just breathe? Sometimes it's not that helpful, but this is to show you how it is. As I mentioned, when we engage the sympathetic nervous system, we're breathing fast and shallow. This is our threat response, fight, flight, and freeze. It can be really hard to access our logical, rational brain and hard to absorb new information. Have a lot of feelings going on, feeling very time pressured, and our mind is very busy and reactive, often in the past or the future, and not in the present, being able to focus. We can feel stuck. We find it hard to relate to others, and we can have mood disturbance. On the other side, the parasympathetic nervous system is what we want to activate, and it's a very good thing to practice regularly throughout the day. We can get a sense of energy, clarity, can become more creative and resourceful. We're more present and focused. We're centered and we're balanced. We can be more responsive, have a sense of well-being. We can relate to others, and we can be calm, patient, and thoughtful. The aim here is to practice how am I breathing through the day, and I'm going to take you through a very brief breathing exercise. You might remember when we looked at we call him Shaky Sam with all those physical symptoms, that anxious breathing, we're increasing the intake of carbon monoxide in the chest. Our breathing increases and we can become dizzy, tingly, and lightheaded. You have a handout that should have been linked, and I hope you have access to that. And again, it might be useful to pause and take notes after this, and maybe even practice the breathing exercises in your handout. When you first begin changing or deepening your breathing, it may be difficult to slow your breathing down. You may wish to try a method of using a 3 in, 1 hold, and a 4 out breathing rate to start off with. Typically we breathe through the nose and we breathe down to the belly. So if we're breathing deeply, our abdomen should rise on the in breath and slowly deflate on the out breath. This is slow, calm, deep breathing. The in breath is typically through the nose. The out breath is through the mouth, almost like blowing through a straw. The out breath is what gives us the most benefit, and it's usually longer than the in breath as we empty our lungs. So we're trying to use a stomach breathing style rather than a high up in the chest breathing style, which is more anxious breathing. It can be really useful to check this by placing one hand on your stomach and one hand on your chest. The hand on your stomach should rise when you breathe in. Try to practice at least once or twice a day at a time when you can relax, relatively free from distraction. The key to progress really is practice, so try to set aside some time each day. By using breathing awareness and retraining, you can reduce your general level of anxiety. You also have a handout along with the breathing retraining of coping skills, deep breathing for managing emotions. So that one encourages you to sit comfortably and place one hand on your abdomen, breathing in through your nose, deeply enough that the hand on your abdomen rises. Pause or hold the air in your lungs, and then exhale slowly through your mouth with your lips puckered as if you are breathing through a straw. The secret is to go slow. So this one highlights maybe breathing in for 4, pausing for 4, and exhaling for 6 seconds through the mouth, and practicing this 3 to 5 minutes a day. It's very useful to actually look at checking in how you're breathing each day. And again, the apps Calm, Breathe, Insight Timer, Headspace and Smiling Mind all have activities to encourage you to practice this evidence-based technique to activate the parasympathetic nervous system and calm yourself down. Only then can we access our rational, logical brain, refocus, get back to the present, and think more clearly again. It's a practice we may need to bring in throughout the day. There are many apps, as I mentioned, on breathing. Also with a link, you have a handout on unhelpful thinking styles. And we'll just briefly run through these, as you should have a description of these. There's all or nothing thinking, sometimes called black and white. An example, if I'm not perfect, I've failed. Or another example, if I do it right, I either do it right or I don't do it at all. We have overgeneralizing, which is seeing a pattern based upon a single event, or being overly broad in the conclusions we draw. For example, nothing good ever happens, or everything is always rubbish. We have a mental filter which pays only attention to certain types of evidence. For example, we're really good at noticing our failures but not seeing any of our successes. We have disqualifying the positive, which is discounting the good things that have happened or that you have done for some reason or another. For example, that doesn't count. Jumping to conclusions. There are 2 types of jumping to conclusions: mind reading, imagining we know what others are thinking about us, and fortune telling, predicting the future. Again, you might want to pause this video to reflect on some of these thinking styles and what may apply to you. Sometimes my students say all of them do, and if that's the case for you, I'd like you to try and pick 1 or 2 that really stand out for you around exam time. Magnification or catastrophizing, or minimizing, so blowing things out of proportion. What if, thinking the worst, which we do tend to naturally do, or inappropriately shrinking something to make it seem less important than it really is. Sort of like a sense of denial, maybe. have emotional reasoning, assuming that because we feel a certain way that what we think must be true and must be a fact and we must obey it. So an example might be, I feel embarrassed, so I must be an idiot. We have shoulds or musts. Using critical words like shoulds, musts, have tos can make us feel quite guilty and like we've already failed. If we apply shoulds to other people, the result is often frustration. I like to replace the word should with could. That seems a bit more empowering where we have choices. And then labelling, assigning labels to ourselves or other people. For example, they're such idiots, or I'm completely useless, or I'm a loser. And the last one we have is personalisation, blaming yourself or taking responsibility for something that wasn't completely your fault. Conversely, blaming other people for something that was actually your fault and not taking responsibility for that. So again, another opportunity to pause and look at all those unhelpful thought patterns, and we hope you have the link to the handout, but what ones may apply to you particularly. As we mentioned, this is a very individual experience. These are just some examples. I need to know everything. I don't have enough time. What if and thinking the worst versus focusing on what you can do now. How I perform equals my self-worth. And focusing what you don't know versus what you do. And negative ruminating thoughts. Social comparison, comparing yourself to others. So again, it's looking about taking a pause and looking at what are some coping statements that you could use for yourself and some coaching statements that can help you in this situation. These are just some examples. I know the material, done the work, I can do this, I've passed exams before. I choose to sit this exam because the goal is important to me. I might be anxious, but I can cope. It's also important that these thoughts are believable to you, that they resonate with you and you believe them to be true. It's important again to make up some of your own that you can really reflect on as you meet this challenge. Exams are really an opportunity to express what you know. Try and get rid of the word performance because that in itself creates anxiety. So we're now about to approach a break, and I'd encourage you to pause the video to actually take some notes that are applicable to you about any ideas you've picked up so far in this workshop. There is another approach to challenging thoughts, which we've talked about this morning, called mindfulness, which is really another body of knowledge. You will come across mindfulness apps and videos as well. As I mentioned, Dr. Russ Harris, which is really seeing thoughts for what they are. And we will take you through a very brief exercise diffusion of thoughts in the second half of the workshop. So again, I'd invite you to take a breath, maybe practice your breathing, and as you would with study scheduling, I'd encourage you to pause the video, to take a deep breath, and to drop your shoulders, drop your jaw. And again, I'd like to encourage you to just do what you should do in regular study breaks. Reflect, pause, maybe stretch, walk around, and I hope you've got some ideas thus far in the workshop. And now we'll be handing over to Julie. Thank you for joining me in this presentation.